welcome to our Think Insights 15 Minutes with, a series of interviews. I'm Andrew Catchpole, editor of Harper's Wine and Spirit, and I'm joined today by David Miles, senior whisky specialist at Edrington-Beam, Suntory. Right, following the monumental disruption of the pandemic, but with spring hope in the air as the vaccines roll out, David's joining us to discuss the possible paths ahead for the spirits world and the trends that might stick. So, hello, David. Thank you for joining me.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed for having me here.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on board. So let's kick off. David, do you want to tell us just a little bit about your background and your current role, just to set the scene for the watchers, the listeners?
Absolutely. So yeah, I work for Edrington-Beam Suntory, a big sales, marketing and distribution company owned by the two shareholders in the name there, the Edrington Group, Scottish company that owns Macallan, Highland Park, the famous grouse, Bregal rum. Beam Suntory, the Japanese-American conglomerate with all the Japanese whiskies, Hibiki, Yamazaki, Toki, Roku Gin, and then also the whole Beam portfolio, Jim Beam Bourbons, Maker's Mark, and things like Lafroy, Auchentoshan, Courvoisier Cognac. So I work for a company that covers a wide variety of different spirits brands. I've got the sometimes rather brilliant and at other times rather ridiculous job title of senior whisky specialist. Basically, my day-to-day responsibility would be training bartenders on whisky, on all the spirits in the portfolio. I also do a lot of training with the retail sector, working with supermarkets, training up buyers, doing consumer sessions. So one of the joys of the job is it's always varied. I'm always talking to different people about different subjects, but to kind of try to summarize it, I teach bartenders about whiskey.
Yeah, well, there's nothing better than being out there in the trade, but obviously also it's an invaluable source being at the sort of front line, as it were, for gathering sort of insights and comment and feedback, isn't it? So it's and a great portfolio there, as you say, sort of a really spanning sort of global.
Yes,
global
I am generally one of the lucky ones, without a doubt.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let's sort of move on to our next question was going to be, will there be learnings in terms of operating the day-to-day business that you've taken from the pandemic period that you and Edrington-Beam Suntory will bring to bear as we now very hopefully sort of move out, the crisis recedes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's boy, has it been a learning experience this last year. Some of the things we've been able to interact with the on-trade still probably more than we would have expected. Running online training sessions, we've been able to develop little training kits that we're able to send out, sample kits, being able to send out to bartenders, and these have probably been, I think it's fair to say, been more successful than maybe we would have expected. Mm-hmm. We've been able to do something similar with consumers as well. Maybe sometimes with consumers almost slightly more indirectly, one step removed. But the way that a lot of the the whiskey shows, the whiskey lounge, have gone online, and we've been able to do these virtual sessions. And I mean, I would have said, one of the learnings from this, I would expect some form of virtual training to continue even when we get back to some form of normality, purely because it's a way to be able to interact with people around the country, around the world. We have been doing training sessions where someone is looking blurry-eyed because they're drinking whiskey at 8 o'clock in the morning in their kitchen, wherever they are. And sometimes it's been me sitting here drinking whiskey at 8 o'clock in the morning because we're doing the sessions. But that has opened up other possibilities for that sort of online training that is going to be feasible going forward. I absolutely want to get back into bars. I want to be doing it face to face. There is no substitute for that. But as an alternative arrangement on the training side of things, this is something we're going to be taking going forward.
So a sort of meshing of the two, basically in a complementary way, and it's I think we've all really learned the possibilities, haven't we? And as you say,
Yeah.
bringing together people on different sides of the world, that reach geographically, it's that's been incredible. But obviously, yes, nothing replaces the face-to-face.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe also just touching on the the influence of social media and how brands, how companies can use social media to communicate messages across. It's pretty a cliche and an unfair cliche to say the whiskey industry tends to be slightly conservative, slightly behind the times with these things. But again, I think the last year has shown how quickly so many brands and companies have adapted to this. And every now and then, I did an online interview about with Bowmore Whiskey. And Bowmore have done a tie-in with Aston Martin. Aston Martin have got an amazing online presence. I did an interview with Master of Malt about this, expecting a few hundred views. And because of the Aston Martin influence, it sure as hell wasn't because of my social media presence. Within 2 days, there'd been 254,000 views of the interview. We wouldn't have even discovered that sort of potential without this happening. So, would be foolish not to keep on looking at that sort of thing going forward.
Yeah, that's very impressive. So with the supplier's role specifically, do you see that as evolving in any meaningful way looking ahead, or do you think things will? You're nodding yes, so I'll let you develop that theme. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I've been very fortunate in the last year working for the company that I work for, and one of the ways that's manifested itself, we have kept working through this, and God bless the British public in many ways. They kept drinking through the last year, so we've seen the on-trade virtually closed down for most of the year, but retail has really taken up that slack, as it were. So we've had to adapt, distribution chains, where the emphasis is being placed. What's been happening with online ordering and everything has been a huge growth area. I think some of that maybe was expected. I think what's been really interesting, and where again we will adapt going forward, is the number of bars who have really made the most of the online opportunities, and the number of bars that are doing their own cocktails, their own delivery services, some using Deliveroo, Just Eat, whatever, some setting up their own delivery services locally, some using Amazon. And sort of apocryphal, I do not have data here, but a couple of my local bars here in North London are doing almost as well from sending out bottled cocktails as they were previously. I've got a bar near to me who are looking for premises to set up basically their own bottling line, even when we get back to some form of normality. So again, the people who are adapting are doing more than just surviving here. They are really getting through this, and they will come out stronger from this.
It's been really impressive, and just to throw in as a sort of parallel from the food world and the wine world, from a webinar I hosted recently, to hear some of the figures and returns to people who had pivoted over and were mixing up home delivery, doing wine tastings for customers out of a wine bar, with over 1,000 people registering. These are serious additional revenue streams, and obviously that's happening purely in the spirits world as well. So it's encouraging to see. Okay, slightly different slant on that then. With both whiskey and across all spirits categories, we would expect I think some of the things we've been talking about, the pandemic and the circumstances accelerating some trends that were there, and then obviously overlaying with new trends. With regard to product itself, with spirits, what sort of trends do you see emerging and continuing as we run through 2021 and beyond?
I think there's certainly two major trends to touch on here, which almost have slightly different ends of the whiskey spectrum. The growth of the sort of flavoured whiskies. seems to be going on and on as a means of introducing younger consumers to the whiskey category. This seems to be going from strength to strength, without a doubt. From our portfolio, Jim Beam have launched a peach flavour, which has gone down really well. It satisfies the refreshment sort of need. People are quite happy to mix it with soda water, with lemonade, whatever, and have a long, refreshing drink in a way that maybe with a more premium single malt whiskey, top end bourbon, you'd be slightly more wary about doing that. It's easier to share with friends, and going forward, maybe when we get to meet with friends. But hopefully in a few months' time, when you can have some people around outside having a barbecue in the summer months, this sort of shared opportunity, that is where that part of the whiskey category, I think, will play very strongly. Slightly towards the other end, the continuing drive for premiumization. People want, it's a big sector of the market where people maybe are looking to drink better rather than more. We're seeing this constantly in the demand for single malt whiskies, and for the more premium, the more aged, the more prestige expressions that are out there. We're seeing this like with some top end bourbons as well. Things like Maker's Mark, for instance, is still going from strength to strength. And you look at some of the underlying changes that have happened in the last year, the tariffs that were put down by both the EU and the USA. So things like bourbon, you would have expected to see much more of a slump in sales of bourbon here because of those tariffs than I think has maybe happened. Bourbon has really, I wouldn't say thrived, but it has maintained a strong position despite that. What would be also quite interesting, say, on the single malt Scotch front is, from a UK perspective, those tariffs that the States put on meant that there was maybe more good quality liquid available to the UK market because there wasn't so much being sold in the States. Now some of those tariffs have been dropped, so maybe the big whiskey companies will be looking to get that, re-establish themselves in the American market. Maybe we will lose access to some of the spirits that were available there, but at the same time, I think it's established a demand, and people will look to keep on finding really good quality whiskey.
Excellent. So, and you mentioned out with friends and so on a little earlier. So, some of what you said sort of leads into my next question, which is how much do we really expect consumer behaviour to change as things return closer to normal?
Yeah. Now this, yes, this is a really interesting one. I think we can look back, that sort of happy month or so back in October when bars were able to reopen for a bit, and I thought what was a really positive thing looking forward is how consumers, for the most part, were happy to adapt. The idea that you could maybe only sit in a bar for a 2-hour time slot and then move on. There would be a curfew. And people seem to be able to accept this. And I'm quite sure that coming out of lockdown this time, the same sort of restrictions will be in place. I'm optimistic that consumers will be able to adapt their behaviour in this way. Again, I think a lot of bars demonstrated how well they could adapt as well to the demands of government, to being able to control the consumers. This sounds a bit Orwellian there, but they were having to insist on time spots. They were, the bars were monitoring. You can't get up and down all the time. You can't walk around without a mask on, and did it. And I think so that will continue. One of the other developments we saw there, and this is something I think we will see continuing even when things do get back to normal. The idea that maybe you were drinking in your time slot in a bar, but when it's up, you could buy some of the bottled cocktails that these bars had there and take the drink back home with you. It was a way to drink a really great quality cocktail at home, made at the bar. I would assume that some of that is going to continue as well. That people, you can go out drinking, but you don't need to bar hop. You may go out to drink in a bar and then buy great quality cocktails from the bar to carry on drinking at home.
Yeah, so a continued sort of evolution, I suppose, in occasion and how you address those, create them, interact with them, and just flexibility, really. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think fortuitously maybe, but coming out of lockdown, as the weather gets warmer and warmer, spring and summertime, being able to, I don't want to sit here and encourage people to go drinking in parks, because that would be wrong. But the outdoor drinking experience, the fact you could get back home and sit in your garden if you have one and continue drinking, is probably going to add to the appeal of that sort of occasion.
Yeah, no, totally. So, okay, one more very significant question for you, I think, and that's, and it is a bit of a crystal ball question, forgive me, as much of this is at the moment. But do you expect significant changes in the bar world? And by that, I think I'm thinking about, London and beyond, especially urban centres versus, out in the suburbs and beyond. So the sort of shape and structure of the industry, which has obviously had such a hard time of it and been, the hardest hit in a way by the restrictions imposed, and again, social distancing, rules of six, etc. when we come out, for possibly quite some time. So yeah, what thoughts there?
Yes, I'm afraid, I think unavoidably there are going to be big structural changes within the on-trade, and it's going to be driven by how people drink, their behavioural patterns here. I think another big factor at play is so much talk about now, let alone working from home, but flexible working. Maybe people are going to be going into the office 2 or 3 days a week, even when they're in the office, staggered working hours. Some people turn up at 8 and go at 4, and others. So the idea of the happy hour drink, of everyone, of hitting the pubs and bars in the centre of a town as they finish work, is going to really change, because we're not going to be living that lifestyle anymore. Again, how flexible bars and pubs can be, the ones whose business model is predicated on, let's say, being in the city of London, getting those after work drinkers there, where you're paying some of the highest rents in the country. How feasible is that as a business model going forward? The other side of that, and again, I think we saw this in the little interregnum between lockdowns, was a lot of local bars maybe doing better than was expected, because people were working at home and maybe would still go out for a drink at the end of work. They were just working somewhere else. So I don't want to be all doom and gloom here. I think there are some real positive signs, but it is going to be a big upheaval. And it's going to be a combination of the short to medium term, as people's work patterns change, and then a longer term change, as bars, restaurants, clubs that have been in certain locations maybe will no longer be viable in their present form, paying their present rents and rates, because the footfall just will not be there.
I mean, one thing I think it's fair to say, and this is absolutely not to ignore the very real pain people individually with their jobs, people with their businesses, etc., in the sector have and are experiencing. But one thing you can say is it's remarkably innovative and adaptive and resilient, I believe. And hopefully there are going to be some real sort of success stories as people battle back out of this and get on their feet. So I'm sure in one shape or another it will all shake down and continue to be you know, the vibrant world that we all love. Forgive me, everyone. There's some drilling noise here, which I've managed to pop in and out of up to this point by muting myself. So I'll be quick and basically thank you very much, David. It's been really insightful. It's been fantastic, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you about you know, what we think is going to happen in the future for the spirits world and the bar world. So thank you very much for joining our insights today.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Excellent, and thank you all for tuning in and watching. Thank you. We'll see you at another session.